I mean, when my grandfather he bought 50% of the Giants in 1991. It was $75 million. And people, I mean, laughed him out of town. Like, if you go back and read the newspapers from then, people were like, you wrote a $75 million check, like, for a hobby, a sports
too
team?
much?
Like, way too much. I mean, people thought it would be faster to burn money than to buy this team.
Welcome back to Portfolio Players, presented by E-Trade from Morgan Stanley. I'm Dan Roberts here at Front Office Sports in New York, and today we have Carolyn Tisch Blodgett, the CEO of Next 3 Ventures, and of course the governor of Gotham FC. Carolyn, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I could have given a much longer resume there. There's so much we'll get into. Obviously, your family are co-owners of the New York Giants. We will get into that and ask about the Giants and talk NFL. But let's start with the NWSL, because it is very of the moment. I mean, as you know, great time to be invested in not just women's sports, but the NWSL. Talk to me about Gotham, especially as the lead owner, the governor of the team, and why you think right now there's so much excitement there with that league.
Yeah, I love that that's where you started and that you were most excited to talk about Gotham and women's sports, because when we started looking to invest in women's soccer in the NWSL and with Gotham specifically, it wasn't of the moment. And we started looking in early 2023, kind of end of 2022, which probably doesn't mean anything to the average person. But at that point, you know, there were, I think, Angels. So if you think about it from an expansion perspective, just starting, not that that's the holy grail, but from an expansion fee perspective, Angel City was an expansion team in 2021, sold for $2 million. You know, fast forward to now, Denver just sold for $110 million. So if we're going back to kind of closer to the Angel City days, what we saw and what excited us, which I think excited many people, was it felt like women's sports was sort of, and the NWSL was kind of doing this, and you know, our bet was it was about to do that. And
good bet.
Good bet. Yes, it was a good bet. We're taking some not good bets. That was a good bet. But I think at the time we saw, you know, there was about to be a great media deal. We didn't know what it was going to be, but if there were, if you were a women's soccer fan at the time, you were watching it on Lifetime, which is not typically, you know, where one goes to find your casual sports entertainment product. It wasn't a part of culture. You didn't have great brands investing in it. There weren't those, you know, eye-popping partnership numbers that you see now, the expansion fees that you see now. And, you know, as I said, it wasn't part of culture. Now it feels like the buzziest thing to talk about is women's sports. But our bet was, you know, if a few of those things change, and if we could be actually instrumental in helping some of those things change, that you would start to see the growth that we're seeing now.
I mean, on one hand, I'm almost hesitant to emphasize too much the ownership and the celebrity faces, because what matters, of course, is the product on the field, the sport, bringing in more fans that way. But certainly with the business, Bob Iger and Willow Bay buying a team seemed to me a pivotal moment in achieving that hockey sticking effect that you expected.
Absolutely. Willow's been a fantastic board member since she's joined. And obviously, you're probably alluding to the number they paid for it, which, you know, it was...
And not just that. I mean, also just general awareness and kind of news attention.
Yeah, I think when you see, you know, Bob is probably one of the most respected people in media today. And as we think about what matters to sports teams growing, media is so core to it. So to see one of the most respected people in media taking a personal bet on this league and on their team, I think says volumes about what the opportunity is and what we all, you know, sitting around the board table believe in what the future of the NWSL could look like.
You're particularly involved in the board or committee of all the owners, isn't that right? Not just the governor of Gotham, but what committee is that with all the team owners?
Yes, so there's the NWSL board, which I sit on. I represent Gotham. That's the governor. That's what that governor role means. And then within the NWSL board, there's multiple committees. There's a sporting committee, commercial committee, expansion, and then there's an executive committee. I'm on the executive committee, and now I am the chair of the executive committee.
Excellent. So, I mean, you're really looking big picture here beyond just Gotham. I mean, the other thing that has happened, obviously, you know, and we can talk about beyond NWSL and WNBA and women's sports writ large, but there was an inflection point, and ironically, it was after Gotham won. I mean, you know, Gotham won it all, we should say, in 2023, but fair to say that was still before this big moment happened, this kind of, not sea change, but the hockey sticking, like we discussed. I mean, what do you think were the biggest factors in all that?
Yeah, so when we won, we started talking to the team in early 2023, you know, deals take forever to close. We ended up not closing. We wired the check on Thursday in November, whatever that date was, like 20th or something, that we wired the check on Wednesday. I flew out to San Diego where the championship was on Thursday because Gotham was in the championship. I should also just say, when we started talking to them, they were in last place. So this was like, okay, we're going to have to turn around the business side. We're going to have to turn around the soccer side. And then we're like, turns out they don't really need us to turn around the soccer side. They got that covered. So we go out to San Diego, and then we win on Saturday. And it was just this incredible, you were all flying home on Sunday, and we're like, did we just get in on the top? Like, is this the pinnacle of, where we could go? I would say from that point, the league was still, they had just, I think a few weeks before, announced what the new media deal was. You were starting to see new investors coming in. You had started to see some brands like Ally who made kind of an early bet on women's sports, but you didn't see what I think we're now seeing. I think one of the things that's been one of the biggest signs to me that's most encouraging about, where women's sports is going, and that it's here to stay, that the business side is here to stay, is the way that sponsors and brands are now talking about their investment in women's sports. So we just announced CarMax, who's our front of kit partner. We just announced that we were extending our partnership with them. And I was with Brandy, their CMO, the other day, and when she was talking about their investment, how she talks about it is exactly the way that she talks about their investment in men's sports. There was nothing charitable about it. There was nothing, community driven about it. They have a very clear media mix model that they look at and they see, and theirs is all sales based. Every brand is different, but they are looking at, are we selling more product because of our relationship with Gotham? And, I think even for the early brands, when people used to talk about an investment in women's sports, it always had a little hint of like, oh, and it's good for the community, and if you have a daughter, you'll show up.
Back padding too. Look at us.
Back padding, exactly. Right. We've done some messy things, but we support women's sports, so it's okay. You just don't hear that from brands anymore. It is a business. It is an investment that people are making, both from an ownership perspective and from a brand perspective. And that has fundamentally changed the conversation.
You mentioned the Liberty, and of course they've had a lot of success. What about just broadly the WNBA, something you're not in, and we'll talk about the rest of your portfolio, but how much do you feel like the WNBA has been a driver in this moment? And by the way, I've also heard the phrase, it's not a moment, it's not just a moment, it's a movement. Mm-hmm. But how much has the WNBA kind of been the model for others? They
are clearly a model. They have 30 years on the NWSL. And they clearly have a generational talent in someone like Caitlin Clark to be able to capitalize on the moment to make it into a movement. I think, what we've seen from the NWSL perspective is it's not an either or. And so the growth of the WNBA is helpful. We are the rising tides lift all boats. I think we very much see that with the WNBA. We have people on our board that are also owned in the WNBA. We have people that own in many other leagues, NFL, MLB, many others. So I would say the success of the WNBA is a model in a lot of ways because, they've been so successful. I think one of the things they've done really well, which maybe we can talk about more later, is around creating stars out of their players and really creating that, the content and the storytelling. So that's a model for us. But I would say we equally look at what has the NFL done well, what has the NBA done well. Because again, I think we're thinking about it as the lens of we're the best women's soccer league in the world, and here in the U.S., we're going to operate as the best and kind of take the best of everyone else's.
It's totally all about stars. We had Midge Purse at one of our events, and I know she ended up doing this streaming series with Alexis Ohanian. I know you're involved with them in some of your other investments, and she said the same, that it's you have to present to people the athletes they're seeing in case they don't know them from on the field, and give them a sense of what the daily life is like. So it's just for every athlete now. They just have to have that kind of social presence.
This is sort of part of our thesis of, my background's at Peloton, which maybe we'll talk about later, but part of our thesis at Peloton was turning the instructors into stars. So
Jess Sims,
love her.
That's the only one I can.
Oh, she's great. You could do more than that. Allie Love, Robin.
That sounds familiar.
Okay, fine. Well, anyway, in the early days of Peloton, when people would say they loved the Peloton brand, what they would, I would ask the follow-up question of like, I'm the head of marketing, like, tell me what you love about it. And they always went right to the instructor that they loved because they had that, when they thought of the bike kind of like a best tech product, the product disappears, the UX disappears. It's just about the content and your interaction with the instructor. And so early on, we made a bet that the best way to grow the Peloton brand was to grow the instructors' brands and really grow our platform via them. I think that's very much the model in sports right now, and one we've brought to Gotham, which is help our players turn into stars and help grow our brand via their brand. And sorry, that was a long story to tell you that.
No, I think that's a great analogy, though. But
it's very much the Peloton playbook. And so one of the ways for us, sitting here with New York as our backdrop, is how do we get our Gotham stars back, into New York culture and show up in areas that you may not, because not everyone is walking down the street thinking oh, when am I going to go to my next women's soccer match? So we kind of need to inject our stars, our players, into New York culture in other ways.
But I love that analogy of, and when I was at Yahoo Finance, obviously we covered kind of the rise of Peloton, but at some point it needed to become a content business, because if everyone who wants the bike has bought the bike, well, how do you keep them in the ecosystem, and how do you get recurring revenue from those people? So I think that was very smart. Applying that to sports, that's interesting. Makes a lot of sense.
I think of, I actually just had this conversation. Well, we're going to talk about other parts of our business, but I just had this conversation with Mike McCarley, the CEO of TGL, 1 hour ago, of are you a sports business? Are you a media business? And I think you have to have the mindset. Obviously, the product on the field needs to be, core, central. If you don't have a great product, the whole thing falls apart. So let me just start with that. But as the CEO of the company, as a kind of leader of the company, you have to have the mindset that you are a media company and you are putting a product on you are, taking that product and turning it into a story people want to be a part of, an entertainment product that people want to be a part of. Otherwise, people tune out.
Well, and in golf, it's all about the creators right now, golf creators. I was going to ask about LOVB, League One Volleyball, but let's do TGL. That's fun. I mean, it just debuted. It had its first, season. Kind of a simulator league from Tiger and Rory. You are an investor in Tomorrow, which is the company behind it, but also you co-own a TGL team, right? The LA team.
We're investors, in LA.
Got it. So how do you feel it went? And in some ways, it's a fascination, because I remember watching the debut at a bar with a bunch of friends. Those friends are golfers. I follow the business of golf. I love watching the majors. I don't golf myself. And at first, there were some visceral reactions like, oh, that's what it is. But then I think very quickly we saw that golf Twitter loved it. How do you feel it went in the first year?
Yeah, so I'm also not a big golfer, although I've dabbled in it. So I would say we looked at the investment in TGL and Tomorrow Sports more broadly from I would say a few different lenses. The first is as an investor, what's most important to us, as I said before, is you have to get the product right. So the first question as we looked at this investment was, are they going to have, again, product in sports mostly is the players. There's a lot else around it, but are they going to have the best players in this sport? And as you said, they had Tiger and Rory as original founders. So yes, they're going to have that. The second part is what's the media piece of it? Are consumers going to be able to find it? Is there a discoverability piece of it? How will the casual fan be able to, discover it and find it? And which is unusual for an early league like this, is they had a relationship with ESPN from the get-go. So you knew they were going to be on ESPN. You knew the casual fan was going to be able to find it. And then the last piece, which is kind of the tech person in me, is there product market fit? And are you actually solving a real need? Or is this just a new product that no one cares about? Which there's probably a very long list of sports investments right now, where there's new product, no consumer fit.
Well, and that was a concern I had about TGL. I was like, do we need more golf? We've got Live. And if you think of spring football, the thinking when all these spring football leagues launched was people just want more football all year round. Maybe there isn't room for 3 more spring football leagues.
Right, exactly. You're right. And obviously it was pre-product, so we didn't know if there was consumer market fit. But I think what we bet on is that golf, as at a participation level, continue to rise. Particularly through COVID, there was an extreme increase in participation in golf, both outdoor and simulated. So for a younger audience, people are actually very, I think for an older audience, it's what do you mean that's not golf? But for a younger audience, that is what they think of as golf. So the participation had risen. And then if you look at the core media product, although, Live is new, but still kind of same core media product, is not a great consumer experience. It is hours and hours. If you're watching any of the tournaments, which I usually do not, it is hours and hours
Final
on the
day.
Weekend. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Tune
most
in on the
people
last day.
really tune in on the last day, and you're to watch them walk. I mean, it is very long. It's not really made for a 2025, consumer. So while we didn't know if there was going to be product market fit, we did know that there was a real consumer need that they were attempting to solve, knowing that, participation had risen and the media product wasn't solving it. So that was kind of our bet. I would say, fast forward to now, we've been and we're minority investors, but we've been incredibly happy with the performance. I think the team truly understands what makes good media content. So like back to that idea of they have the best product on the field. They know what makes good media content. And because they are kind of have startup in their DNA, they know how to pivot and adjust along the way to make it better. So if you think about, I watched that first game too, and we were all kind of texting in my next 3 team of like, did they nail the product? Did they not? What do people think? And if you watched it closely, they've made a lot of changes along the way. I think they will continue to iterate the product too, but they very much have the kind of tech DNA of like, we need to continue to test, learn, and pivot along the way. So we've been really happy with the investment so far.
Of course, what's unusual about the teams in TGL, you're in the LA team, but there's really no reason it's tied to those cities. In other words, it's not like the players on that team are from LA. It's just they assigned the golfers to various teams, right? So it's not at all like with Gotham or the Giants.
Correct, but it's interesting actually, because if you look at the Giants, it's a legacy. Well, yeah, if you look at the Giants, it is the core Giants fan lives in New York, is from New York, because for so many years, the only way to experience being a Giants fan was local. Sports used to be a local business, right? I mean, fast forward to before there was even watching on TV, the only way you could engage with it was you drove to, at that time, I guess, Giant Stadium or Yankee Stadium, wherever they were playing, and you walk through the turnstile, you sit down on your seats, and that's how you can experience the product. Then you could see it on TV, but again, you could only really see what was in your market. Fast forward to today, fandom is digital. There's no bounds to where you could be a fan from. So that's actually, when we talk about the Giants, why we are thinking about a more global approach to fandom there. But so back to TGL, part of what we were excited about partnering with Alexis and the LA team was, I think they understand how you build digital fandom, how you build communities that are really just digital. I mean, there's no footprint in LA, right?
Right. So that's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it is all digital. But so understanding how you build fandom digitally and when there are no geographic bounds is obviously critical for LAGC, but I would argue it's critical for Gotham and it's critical for the Giants, because that is what fandom looks like today. Yeah,
in some ways I think of TGL as similar to Unrivaled. Yes, there are teams, but they're almost arbitrary. It's just because we need teams, right? It's or you could look at PLL, Premier Lacrosse, with the touring model, but it works. You know, it's just a collection. You need the branding, you need the logo, and a team to kind of root for. Right. I think it goes back to that like existential question of what makes fandom? Like, is it, do you have to ever walk into a stadium to become a fan? And that's something we talk about at Gotham a lot too, is obviously, but we're a very local business right now. We need to get people into the stadium, but there is a world in which you can have tremendous fandom of people that never actually step foot in the stadium. And there's other ways to monetize it. European soccer is probably a good example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about League One Volleyball, LOVB. Just another one of these suddenly in the mix leagues. I think there's a lot of these upstart kind of challenger leagues, PWHL, that have risen to prominence. And I think in many ways, thanks to WNBA and NWSL, kind of the bigger leagues within that space. How's that going? Volleyball.
Great. Another sport I didn't know that I was going to learn about. So I would say for us, the reason we were so excited about Love Volleyball, first of all, the founders are fantastic, but this was not we didn't go out and say, we believe in women's sports, what's another women's sports play? The reason we were particularly excited about volleyball is, I guess I would say there's another example of where there's tremendous kind of room for disruption, because during the cycles where there's Olympics, where there's big moments where volleyball is watched, they can attract, some of the biggest fans out there, but there's no consistent, ability to watch. But more than that, their model is really actually a youth sports bet, because they are rolling up many club volleyball programs across the country and kind of consolidating them under one roof, kind of making the back end more seamless for them, sharing best practices across them. And then they are also launching a professional league on top of it. So you can imagine if you grew up, through this club system. So first of all, there's just a good business model around rolling up the clubs. But you can imagine from a player perspective, like, are they going to get the best player pool? And you would think if you've been a part of this system, all the way through, that's where you're going to end up playing on a professional level.
That's interesting because, first of all, big runway, obviously. But also, I think we're seeing kind of the professionalization and maybe to some people this is not depressing, but it's like, but the corporatization, too, of a lot of aspects of sports, right? I mean, we could look at college with NIL deals. In some ways, it's starting to feel like college is professionalized and now high school is college. But with private equity kind of flooding into sports ownership, even at the youth level, that's kind of a great example. I mean, that seems to be the latest trend for investment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are not investors in any, but we very much see that. Let's
talk about the NFL. We saved it for last.
Yes.
Obviously, you grew up around the team, and the family or co-owners, everyone knows kind of the Maras and the Tisches. How did you sort of parlay that into looking at investing in other sports? And obviously, the NFL, in some ways, like, yes, it's what everyone looks to, but it's also singular and unique, and it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my grandfather became a co-owner with the Mara family in 1991. I was 6 years old, and it really changed my personal trajectory, our family's trajectory. I think the beauty of what we saw early on is the power of sports to bring people together. In that case, it was our family, but you see it every day in any sport you go to. You see how sports brings people together. And so I actually wrote my college application essay around 3 generations of women bonding over football, because my grandmother, my mom, my sister, and I were, at every Sunday, this is what we did. We did together as a family. So the NFL was and the Giants was in my DNA. I started working with the team when I left Peloton. I started working with them really more in a kind of very casual advisory capacity, bringing the expertise I had in growing Peloton and building a great global brand and bringing that to a legacy property like the Giants. And so we didn't actually, and by doing that, I realized really quickly that exactly what you said is the NFL is, one of one, best at what they do, the model for everyone else. But there are all, I guess not even but, and there are all these other leagues and all these other kind of ancillary businesses that are growing up around it and disrupting it in a lot of ways. And so I brought this idea to my family of, we will always be core NFL owners. Do we also want to be a part of what the future of sports looks like? And do we have an opportunity to actually help drive what the future of sports looks like? And that's how we started Next3.
And do you feel like there are NFL owners, traditional families, where their answer to that would be, no, like, I'm good.
Yeah, probably.
We have our thing.
Yeah.
Because it does, when you look at NFL ownership now, and obviously this season what was new was opening the doors to private equity up to 10%. We saw a number of teams quickly take that route. It seems to me the ownership model is changing. Of course, you still have many, the Maras and the Tisches and the Rooneys and the Crafts. I'm from the Boston area. That was the old playbook. One family owns the team for decades. They pass it down for generations. The Glazers, maybe eventually they sell to another family, and it's simple and it's straight. But now we're seeing that change because in many cases it's the private equity, the institutional investors, and I'm talking not just about the NFL, but other leagues, these ownership structures and the sale processes too are changing and becoming more complicated, right? And maybe that's because everyone is flooding into sports ownership, not just the NFL. But now it's like the secret's out.
Right, right. Well, I think it all is part of the professionalization of sports. I mean, when my grandfather he bought 50% of the Giants in 1991, it was $75 million. And people, laughed him out of town. Like, if you go back and read the newspapers from then, people were like, you wrote a $75 million check, like, for a hobby, a sports
too
team?
much?
Like, way too much. People thought it would be faster to burn money than to buy this team. It's just not, it was a hobby. No one thought about it as an investment. Obviously now we're sitting here and there's, an entire industry around the business of sports. So I think with the professionalization across the board of what sports teams look like, you're starting to see a much more professional ownership structure too.
Do you think, obviously there's the franchise valuations and, the Celtics selling for $6 to $7 billion and people wonder, can these go up forever, these price tags? But is it that simple in terms of why right now everyone wants to get in on a piece of a sports team? Because there's also the actors and the athletes trying to buy a stake, and they're not just doing it because they want to flip it in 4 years and make money. It's, why right now is this the hottest thing? Because it certainly is. Everyone wants to own a piece of a sports team.
I go back to what I said before about what we saw early on, I think, as owners at the Giants is I can't think of another asset that brings people together in the way that sports does. If I think about when we look at investments, as any like private equity or venture capitalist investors look at investments, if you found a product that brought people with such divergent opinions together, if you found a product that made people drop everything that they're doing and want to be there and spend all this money. I mean, if you like strip out all the names and all the numbers of what the business is, and you just talked about it as like this product that brings people together.
That's my team.
Right, exactly. That you would spend any amount of money on, that you live and breathe by, that you will buy merchandise for even when they're losing. I mean, go through each of those without the names on it. Of course you would invest in it. So I think people are starting to realize, in a fractured media environment, in a world that's highly politicized and, fill in the blank issues, sports continues to be the thing that brings people together. And that's really powerful.
What % of your time these days goes to the Giants?
I always just say a third, maybe because that's like the only way I can do the math in my head.
What's the other third?
Oh, the 1/3 Gotham, NWSL, 1/3 Giants, 1/3 next 3 other.
Got it. And are you, living and dying for each game? And I mean, I have to ask, like, did it kill you to see Saquon win a Super Bowl with the Eagles?
I do love Saquon. He's a really good guy. I've always felt that it's actually interesting. I feel like I was much more when I was more just in a traditional owner fan. I felt much more like I could live and breathe like the winning and the losing. I think now it is a business. I mean, for me, at Gotham games, I feel like I'm hosting potential partners. I'm hosting potential new suite members. I'm hosting media. Same at the Giants. It feels like a job. So actually, I have 3 young kids and I don't usually go to away games. So I actually really love an away game that I could sit on my couch and watch with my kids and like really listen. Feels like a gift.
Yeah, it's business. So does that take away at all from the emotion of it?
I don't think so. I mean, the emotion, I think, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm a fan as much as anyone else is. So I very much feel the emotion of the winning and the losing.
Yeah. What are you not in that you would love to be invested in sports?
There's a lot. I would say we didn't start next. We've been asked plenty of times, would you take outside capital? How big do you want to be? How many investments do you want to make a year at Next 3? And we really, I think what's been helpful for me personally in running Next 3 is that we are a family investment fund at the end of the day. So we can do 100 investments a year, we could do 0, and we're just going to do the ones that we want to be in. But the only investments we're making are ones where we feel like we can add strategic value. And so honestly, my time, our team's time has been the limiting factor. We never want to be on, if we look around at the cap table and we can't answer why, or if we look at investment and we can't answer why we are on the cap table, we're not going to do the investment.
When you say why, do you mean what we can add or why it'll be a good investment for us?
Oh, I meant what we can add or what we can learn. Some of it is what we can learn. I think, back to the LAGC example for TGL, learning how to create digital fandom is something that I don't think we're experts at. We can very much learn from. Others, it could be that we are adding value either as Giants owners, as Gotham owners, as Peloton brand builders. I mean, a lot of the time people want our expertise actually more from Peloton than anything else. But if we can't answer that question and we are there to write a check, then it's not an investment we need to be making.
I didn't hear in there necessarily a specific thing that you'd love to invest in, but maybe you don't want to say, what you have your eyes on.
No, because there's a few that we've passed on that maybe we'll come back to. I feel like media lives a long time. I don't want to say it.
100%. Let's end on this. Something right at the intersection, the nexus of everything we've been talking about. NFL, new and nascent things that are hot for investment. Women's sports is flag football. And what the NFL is doing with potentially a flag football league, and they're already spinning their wheels talking about a potential separate media rights package for flag football. Is that something you guys are involved in, thinking about, looking at?
Definitely something we are looking at and thinking about. I saw, just not that we make investments based on my personal experience, but my daughter played flag football from a young age, and I watched how fandom grew. I mean, she's obviously always been an NFL fan and a Giants fan, but I watched she'd recruit her friends, and they were like, what's flag football? I don't like, I'm not into the NFL. I'm not into the Giants. And then they would start playing, and they became diehard fans. And that's, that is how, so fandom can either be passed down generationally. We see that very much in the NFL. Fandom can also be passed from the ground up. And we see that actually with Gotham. A lot of kids play youth soccer, but they don't have a team to root for. And then they kind of convince their parents to go to a Gotham game. And then they convince their parents to become fans. So playing at the grassroots level very much translates into fandom. And so for flag football, an opportunity to unlock an entire new group of people that could become fans. Obviously, there's plenty of female fans of the NFL, but could never play before. And now all of a sudden can experience the product, can play the product, and how that translates into fandom for the NFL overall. I think there is tremendous opportunity there.
Nothing wrong with making investments based on your personal experience. I'm sure that's how many owners make their investments.
That's probably true, yes.
Who's an NFL owner, either individual or family, that you look to and think, oh, they've done so much right?
I have a lot I could point to. Well, first I would say Jed York, I think, has been really a leader in kind of the next, in the 49ers, the next generation of NFL owners. We are investors with them in a couple. They were sort of early on in taking their core asset of their NFL team, the 49ers, and investing around it. So I would say they're very much a model. Mark Wilf, who owns the Vikings, we sit on the executive committee of the NWSL together. They own the MLS and NWSL team in Orlando. And so I love Mark. He's been a tremendous partner to me at the NWSL. And I think they've done so much right from a core product perspective. I mean, last year, they won the NWSL championship. The Vikings were in the playoffs. I think their MLS team was also like steps away from the championship. And I kept saying to him, like, Mark, we need a little of your Kool-Aid over here in the New York sports world. So they've clearly done a lot right in the sports side, but if you've ever been to a game at the Viking Stadium, they do a tremendous job on the fan experience side. And they really, I think, take that consumer first approach that we try to do too.
Great shout outs. Good.
Yeah, love them both.
Carolyn, thank you so much. Really good conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.